Hi everyone, welcome to another video. The last few weeks has been pretty hectic for me. I've been to quite a lot of live auctions, seen some fantastic cars, really interesting auction prices, and I've actually got quite a few more live auctions coming up in the next few weeks. But there was one that escaped me. It was at an event called the Concours de Légende in Wiltshire at Wilton House, and I just didn't have time. It's quite a few hours drive for me. But it looked like a fantastic event, so a bit gutted to miss out actually. The Concours event was over 3 days. They had lots of different stages, famous people speaking there, Ian Callum, Tiffany Dell, Ross Brawn. They had a supercar drive-through. They had the Earl of Pembroke's collection there, some really impressive cars, and they had this classic car auction there. And the auction was hosted by Dore and Rees, I think more associated with antiques. I think they have quite a few people from Antiques Roadshow on the team, in fact. But I think they started doing classic cars in about 2021, and they do prestige events in the southwest of England. This was actually the first time I've really come across and looked at them in detail. And as I say, a bit gutted I couldn't go because there were some really incredible cars there. So there was the ordinary stuff, if you like. They had TR5, Jaguar E-Type, but then a couple of really exceptional cars. I think there were just 40 odd lots. I'm just going to show you through probably about 8 or so, 6 or 8 or so of the ones that were really interesting for me at least. I'm going to show you through them on the screen, tell you a bit about them, and just to let you know before I get started, I normally quote the prices inclusive of all fees. Now there were 2 different fee structures here. If you were there in person, it was 14.4%. including VAT, and if you were off-site it was 15.6% if you were bidding online. So the prices they quote on their website are the hammer price only. They have not given a price inclusive of fees, and so I'm going to give that hammer price because I don't know whether people were there in the day or online, so I don't know for sure the absolute cost. Get started with this interesting little 1968 TR5. So obviously looked the same pretty much as the TR4A, but of course had the 6-cylinder engine, and therefore I think a bit of a sweet spot in the TR range. Many people prefer the looks of the TR4, 4A and 5 over the TR6, but it still had effectively the same engine as the early TR6, 150 horsepower initially there. But in 2016, this particular TR5 went under some conversion by Webcon, giving it full ignition mapping, rolling road tested, and made 170 horsepower, which is pretty impressive actually, and 180 pound-foot of torque. So a pretty nippy little TR5, I love that. This one has been owned for 6 years, owned since 2020, used sparingly and stored in a dehumidified garage. It had also had a new overdrive gearbox and differential fitted, and front and rear bumpers. So clearly had quite a lot spent on it, including that engine work. Done about 80,000 miles. It was guided at 30 to 40,000 pounds, but didn't sell. It is quite a lot of money for a TR5. And next up with this little Lancia Fulvia. It's a Series 2 1600 Sport Zagato. And this had been the subject of an extensive restoration, had about £12,000 spent on it in 2022, not really done any miles since then. So they first came along in 1965 with a 1200cc engine, and then the Sport Zagato was offered later with a slightly enlarged engine, and then it came along the 1600 HF unit, which this one is. So the most desirable of them. Also had a 5-speed gearbox from 1971 onwards, so this one a 1972 car, very close to the end of line. And the Sport Zagato, lighter and more nimble than the standard Fulvia. This one had a new wiring loom, timing, fueling system, rebuilding of carbs, new fuel pump, etc, etc. So quite a lot spent on it. And it sold for hammer price £24,000. I think that's a pretty good buy actually. This one was a 1970 1750 GTV, fully restored and upgraded to fast road specification. So the GT Veloce was the top of the range, part of the 105 series Alfa Romeos, Bertone designed, and really, really desirable at the moment. Some of these are good ones, are fetching a lot of money actually. And of course this bigger engined 1750 GTV, almost 120 horsepower. It was a twin cam 4-cylinder engine of course. This particular one was stripped to bare metal, treated to new rear wings, bulkhead, front and rear floor pans, loads of other stuff as well. It was obviously, I imagine, reading between the lines, quite a rusty one to start with. Then been painted, obviously, and basically everything mechanically has either been rebuilt or replaced. The original 1750 engine was retained but rebuilt to 2000 specification. Different pistons, cylinder head rebuilt with larger valves, high lift cams, new Weber carbs, etc, etc. And the rebuild saw 165 horsepower out of that engine. I think there were 120 as standard, so that's a huge increase. I think tastefully modified ones of these 105 series cars seem to do pretty well, as long as the mechanics are in line with traditional ALFA, let's say. Interior refurbished, new seats, Alcantara trim on the dash, and it says £60,000 invested in parts and services alone. So huge investment and rebuild, and the guide price, £50,000 to £70,000. I mean, I think that seems pretty reasonable for that kind of car. It didn't sell, however. So then on to an interesting little car, 1975 Ferrari 208 GT4. So this was the DINO BERTONE designed rather than Pininfarina designed 308 at the time. And of course, the 208 made because of the Italian VAT laws, basically. So they had to reduce the capacity of the engine to under 2 litres to get under that threshold, and making the smallest ever production Ferrari V8. Still made about 180 horsepower. This particular one has been in the UK for about 10 years and been largely stored. And then some recommissioning works in 2021 at a cost of £9,000. Engine received a full service and tune, all belts and fluids, etc. Lots of other stuff as well. Paintwork refresh, etc. Now, reading between the lines, just because it hasn't really, by the looks of it, been used for quite a number of years, I'd suggest this may not have been the best example, and I can't really tell for sure from the photos, but the fact that it said it needed some paintwork refresh in some areas just leads me to get that impression. And it was guided at £40,000 to £50,000. I think these Dinos are a little bit hit and miss whether they sell or not. It didn't sell. And then onto a Jaguar E-Type. So this was a 1962 Series 1. They called it a Roadster. I think we usually say open two-seater in the UK. This one had been owned for 29 years and had had a huge amount of investment. It was previously a California car, came to the UK in 1997, and was used for 10 years or so. There was about £10,000 spent on various improvements, and after that, the engine was stripped, rebuilt for a cost of £14,000. It then had a right-hand drive conversion, a full retrim. Then it went in for 4 years of work in the late 20-teens. Removal and rebuild of the rear subframe, uprated Series 2 front brakes. It's got a rebuilt Synchromesh Series 2 gearbox, etc. So as you can tell, over 3 decades of ownership, this has had a ton spent on it. Looks really nice from the photos. Did look like a good example. Guided £70,000 to £90,000. Now, even for a nice Series 1, that's reaching kind of top end nowadays. Hard to tell how good it really is from the photos, to be honest with you, but it didn't make that guide price. Interestingly, there was a Series 3 as well. There was a Signal Red V12 manual, and that made £56,000 hammer price. So that one did sell. That was a 75 Series 3. Now, there were some really expensive cars at this auction, and we're moving on to one of them now. In fact, one of the most expensive ones was near the end of the auction, and we'll come to that at the end. Just incredible what that one sold for, actually. This is obviously an AC Ace Bristol 1958 car. And of course, effectively the basis for the Shelby Cobras of the 1960s. These ran initially a 2-litre 6-cylinder engine, which was effectively Bristol's version of the pre-war BMW unit. Of course, BMW inherited, as part of post-war reparations, a lot of BMW plans, engines, etc. Triple carbs, 120 horsepower. This one has had a ton of work on it. Engine rebuilt a couple of times, clutch and gearbox rebuilt, and it competed in 2010 in the Spa 6-hour race. Then 10 years ago, it had a ton of work again on suspension, brakes, etc. And the history file is so huge on this one, it actually has over £150,000 worth of invoices for restoration and mechanical works since 2013. So you can see a staggering amount of money spent on that car. What a fantastic car and a real piece of history. Guided at £200,000 to £250,000, it didn't sell. Then moving on to something a bit more modern, Ferrari F355. So this is a 1999 car, and these have been fetching some pretty decent money, actually. For me, I prefer them over the 360. So of course these had a 3.5-litre V8, 375 horsepower, but really it's the manual cars that have been fetching the good money. This one, an F1, very early iteration of the F1, so not like modern gearboxes now, of course. This is a very low ownership car, extremely well maintained, huge amount of invoices, cam belt services, clutch, all kinds of stuff done to this, a huge amount spent, and guided £85,000 to £100,000. It didn't sell, another one that didn't sell, and I think if that had been a manual, it would have made that money no problem in my opinion. So onto an interesting car here, and interesting because I was really surprised actually this sold so cheaply in my eyes. Perhaps I missed something on this. Let me know what you think in the comments. This was a 1996 Porsche 911 Carrera, so a cabriolet, and obviously 993 generation, so still air-cooled at this point, 3.6 in the Carrera, 6-speed manual, and described as being presented in very fine order, both cosmetically and mechanically. Huge maintenance history again, with lots of big jobs and maintenance throughout its life. And this one made hammer price of 38,000. Perhaps that is about right for the kind of high 80,000 miles that it's done. Just quickly going to feature this Mercedes SL320, so it's an R129 generation car, 1995, obviously 3.2 inline straight six. And featuring it because I thought it was an absolute bargain. 4-speed auto in this, £8,000 spent on it since 2024. New hydraulic roof rams, they can be a problem. Extensive history throughout its life. Now, I did look at these photos and wondered if there was some pretty bad swirling on the paint. It's very difficult to tell from photos, which is why I always like to see them in person. So maybe that's why, but it only made £5,500 hammer price. I think that's a great buy. Even if it's not in fantastic condition, it's about as cheap as you're going to get an R129, and I still think they might appreciate. As I keep saying, they haven't yet. And then perhaps onto the other extreme of the Mercedes SL, if you like. It's a 190 SL, a 1958 car. I love these, 1.9 litre 4-cylinder engine. Of course, not particularly powerful, 105 horsepower or so. This is an American car that came to the UK in 2002. It's had some restoration work. Floor pans to both sides were sorted out, repairs to the sills, so obviously there was some rust there. Gearbox overhauled, new convertible roof, and in 2025 then recommissioned with replacement fuel pump, filter, rebuild of the carburetors, lots of other stuff as well. It's also had new carpets, overhaul of the braking, etc. Now these 190 SLs, they were regularly fetching £100,000. This one, of course, being left-hand drive, is never going to fetch quite as much. £75,000 to £85,000 was the guide price, which seems fairly high, I would say. I think it has to be a really, really good car if it's left-hand drive to fetch that kind of money nowadays, and that one didn't sell. Then we're going much more modern, 2014 Ferrari 458, obviously a Spider, 45,000 miles, so kind of moderately high for a Ferrari, I suppose. But I'm featuring this because I think it's a real sweet spot for Ferrari. Now, it doesn't necessarily appeal to me much. I'm not particularly a modern Ferrari aficionado, but I think it's a sweet spot in terms of it being the last of the naturally aspirated V8s, of course. The 488 went to turbocharging. You've still got this high revving 9,000 RPM V8, 565 horsepower. Now, of course, more modern ones are much more powerful, but do you need that much more than 560 odd horsepower? Possibly not. This one had a huge amount of factory options on it. Extensive carbon fibre, including the carbon fibre racing seats. Recent expenditure of £18,000 just in the last couple of years. Had a load done to it, as I say. These, of course, had dual clutch transmission, front tub repairs, underbody restoration, which perhaps makes me a little bit nervous about why it needed that. Lots of other stuff, full paint correction, etc. This one sold for £127,500 hammer price. Of course, we know the rare Speciale, Pista, etc. models are just going ridiculous in the last year or so. The prices have gone absolutely through the roof, ludicrous, out of reach for the huge majority of car enthusiasts. And so actually, these ordinary Ferraris, I think, are going to increase as well, particularly this era, where they've still got that sweet spot of none of the modern electronics, and which people are shying away from, let's be honest. So, I think that could be a good buy. Probably be able to own that car, enjoy it for a bit, and hopefully sell it on, maybe even make a bit of money. Now for the star of the show. This car was just absolutely incredible. I didn't know it existed, actually, I have to admit, and I was just blown away by it. What a car. So it's an Aston Martin Bertone Jet 2+2. And so, not knowing much about it, I looked into the history, actually. So it's comes from a series of Jet Aston Martins. So the first one, I think, was based on the DB4 chassis. And then there was a Jet 2 concept car in 2004, which was a shooting brake version of the Vanquish. Never sold. It was just a concept car, I believe. Then fast forward to 2013, 2014 to this Jet 2+2. So this based on the Aston Martin Rapide, of course. So 2+2 because it's a 4-seater car, of course, Aston Martin's 4-seater. and this amazing shooting brake design. It was celebrating 60 years of partnership between Bertone and Aston Martin, and unfortunately this was at the time when Bertone went out of business. Shut for good, and only one was made before they shut. So what did they do to the Rapide? Well, they extended its roofline, reworked the proportions, had a full-length panoramic dimmable glass roof, loads of other stuff, including rear seats that actually folded flat. A bespoke interior, two-tone combination of truffle and black leather. Looks absolutely stunning. Custom wood and chrome finishes, and of course it still had the 6-litre V12, 475 horsepower-ish in that car. And as I say, one of one, what a car. 20-odd thousand miles on this, and amazing what it sold for. I couldn't believe it, £260,000. That's hammer price. But, you know, that's a one of one shooting brake Aston Martin. What a cool car. Almost as amazing, there was another lot, just before it in fact, which was the Jet 2 number plate. So, what do you think that sold for? Presumably bought by the same person. That sold for £87,000 hammer price. So someone with the fees has spent 100 grand on that number plate. Just the mind boggles, doesn't it? So there we go, a look at some amazing cars, just a quick run through, and looking at it a bit wistfully because I really wish I had gone. Next year, hopefully I'll make it. That Concours event looks really good actually. So it's definitely one to watch out for on the calendar. I've got another 3 auctions coming up in the next 2 weeks, I think, so I'll be there in person at those. Please do watch out for those videos. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.